What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolve video. Alright soldiers, now in this video we're going to be talking about the Festive Forest Scrap deck. Now I know this deck isn't going to be too prominent since set 15 is already out, along with set 14, so all the set 15 decks are definitely going to be doing better than this deck. But I did want anyone who was interested in building it or interested in wanting to look at what this deck can do, just know about it just in case you might be sitting across from it and you don't know what this deck does. But of course, without wasting any time, let's go ahead and talk about our legendary card. Alright, so we have our legendary card. So we have Ozumi Enchanting Hostess. So she's a 3-cost 2/2. You can evolve for 1, and then when she comes to play Fanfare, the next festive card you do play costs 2 less. Alright, this can definitely help out with some bigger turns that you want to go for or making these festive cards cheaper, but what this deck really does want to do is you want to kind of like ramp up into combo 3. It's kind of like the force kind of thing that you're going to be doing here. So getting to that combo 3 is going to be very important, especially from when we go into this evolve card. Alright, but looking at her festive card though, so she turns into a 3/3, and you can also activate for 2 play points. To banish another festive card from your field, you can search your deck for a follower that costs 7 or less and then summon it, and then you shuffle. You can activate it only if you had at least played 3 cards this turn, and then you can activate only once per turn. Alright, so it's good that they put that restriction there so this deck wasn't absolutely busted on putting out a whole bunch of 7-drops, but this is going to be a big fat turn in one go, so being able to spend a total of 5, I think that's what it is, 5 or 6 play points in one turn, just to go ahead and putting out a 7 cost, that might really help prolong the game, or really, accelerate your game plan so you can get close to winning. And before we start talking about the boss monsters we can play from this evolve card, let's talk about our spell card. So it's a 2-cost spell card. We have Illusions of Comfort, so it costs 1 less if it's played from the EX area, then it costs another 1 less to play if there's a Ozumi Enchanting Hostess on your field. You can select any fall on the field and then return it to its owner's hand to give you later +1 defense. Now this is good and bad hard removal. Good in terms of being able to get rid of a big card off of the field no matter what the stats are. Now it is bad just because on the fact that you are going to be, recycling that resource that your opponent has, but it does immediately remove the threat off of the board. But it is very nice to go ahead and put this card into your EX area, so when you do go for your Hozomi, make sure you play the festive card that you do want to be free first, just because this card, if played from the EX area, is already going to be free as well. Alright, so let us look at the cards that we're able to get that would really give us some value off of the Ozumi Evolved. Alright, so we have an oldie but a goodie Forest Oracle Pascal, so it's the 7-cost card that you optimally want to get, just because it has ward, and when it comes to play, you can select any fall on the field and put it on the top of its owner's deck, really stalling your opponent out, and then it has this end phase to give each follower in your field +2/+2 while giving your leader +4 defense. And then with it having these amazing stats, and mind you, it does give all the other followers on your field, and of course with the next card we are going to be playing that's kind of like a boss monster, it's going to be really good in terms of control elements of having this card have its end turn proc. And then of course we have Sylvia the Condemner, which is another 7-cost card that you are able to get, which has some hard removal and some good burn, and then a very good stat body line if you want to have like a big board, just in case if you already went for Forest Oracle Pascal and you just want a big Sylvia on the board. So like realistically you're gonna have a big fat board if you manage to have both these things on the field. But if we're playing a normal game of Shadowverse, of course all of our cards are gonna get removed before it comes back to our turn. But there's the other applications with Sylvia here that we're able to pitch her and, use 2 play points to get rid of a 5 or more follower off the field to go ahead and destroy it, just in case we're running a bit stallish. Alright, and then lastly, a card that I do highly agree with is Elgeni of the World. It's still a pretty good staple neutral card that'll give you some hard removal, heal you if you need it, and then draw a card. Just do have to make sure that this is the only card that you have on your field, but to be honest, most of the other cards that we are going to be running in the deck aren't very big, so this might be an ability that might come up often. Alright, so I did want to give an honorable mention to another form of neutral cards that you can play off of the effect here for Ozumi. You can get Magna Saber, and then, having the Magna transformation is going to put your Magna Saber into your EX area, which when you need to have 3 festive cards in your EX area, this can really help out your game plan a whole bunch. Now the reason why I didn't include this into my own personal build, which I am going to give the spoiler, sorry soldiers, but I didn't include this into my personal build just because this card doesn't really do too much and its evolve just seems kind of niche. But if you opened a whole bunch of sets 14 and 15, then this isn't a bad option to go if you want to go ahead and just build the deck and have some fun with it. Alright, so since we haven't talked about any of the festive cards yet so far, I wanted to go ahead and introduce these neutrals that are going to be in every festive deck. Alright, and looking at the first card, so we have Stay in Paradise, so it's a 1-cost spell card. Looking at the top 4 cards, you can put a festive card from among them into your EX area, put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. Alright, so essentially this is going to be the perfect turn 1, or especially turn 2 if you've already managed to put a card into your EX area from turn 1. So being able to just go ahead and filter through your deck, figure out what festive cards you're going to need and for the future engine. And of course, you're going to be having multiple festive cards in your deck, which we will be going over. But being able to look at the top 4 is just very good on turn 1. Alright, and then next up we have Torch Bearing Guide, which is a 2-cost 2/3, and when it comes to play, you put a festive card from your hand into your EX area, you can draw a card, and if there are at least 3 festive cards in your EX area, you can give this follower +1/+1. Alright, so effect that's not really going to be happening on turn 2 too often, but if you do have the Magna Saber package, this can definitely happen on turn 3. We're able to have those 3 festive cards in your EX area, and you can turn this into a 3/4, but that's when we start getting in the range where our opponent can start removing things for 4 damage. And alright, let's transition into the smaller festive cards, and of course, if I haven't said it before, this deck is going to be a secondary version with both festive and puppeteery cards, so the deck is going to have a little bit of a fusion, or at least the puppeteery deck is going to be shaken up with the festive deck. Alright, so not going over every little thing here. So we have the Tinkering Shopkeeper, which is a nice kind of goblin in a way, except with, -1 defense, but allows you to put puppet tokens into your EX area, and if you have 3 cards in your EX area, you can heal for 1. And then we have the Kakakuri Servant, which is a 2-cost 2/2, which allows you to put a puppet token into your EX area. And then we have the Elven Waitress, a very wonderful card that allows us to put a card from our hand to the bottom of our deck, and we can give Relator +2 defense, so this really does help if we do draw our 7-cost cards. But if you're running Sylvia the Condemner, this is kind of like a card you can definitely hold on to for the later turns just in case you need removal. And of course, we'll talk about the evolves when we go into the deck list. Alright, but let's talk about the confusing card that I'm still kind of like racking up on how to really build up, just because I'm scared that this card can get removed. But we have Bastion of Seasons. Alright, so let's go over this card. So it's a 4-cost 2/4, you can evolve from 1, and while this card has 3 seasonal counters or less, it can't attack enemies. And at the start of your end phase, you can select a follower on the field. You can give it +X/+X or deal it X damage, and place a seasonal counter on this card. X equals this follower's attack. And then when evolving Bastions of Seasons, so it still has that static ability of 3 seasonal counters or less, it can't attack enemies. But on evolve, you can select enemy follower on the field and deal it 4 damage. And at the start of your end phase, selecting a follower on the field, giving it +X/+X, or deal it X damage and place a seasonal counter on this card. X equals the follower's attack. Alright, and here's kind of like the hard part on the deck that I'm trying to understand with, is that you do pay 4 for this, and you have to make sure that this card does stay up. So when you get to play this card at a pretty good time is going to be kind of confusing, because there's not that many cards that are going to be plussing up this follower's attack. But with this evolve, being able to deal a total of like 7 damage to one card is nice for good removal. And this having a 5 defense and leaving it up and reserved, there's going to be many options that our opponent is going to have to getting rid of this card. So banking your whole entire game plan on this is going to be pretty tough. Alright, so basically this is how I'm assuming the game plan is supposed to go. So if we're playing first, of course, optimally, we want to be going first, and being able to give this follower +2/+2, we can make it into a 4/6. That is kind of a scary number, and then being able to keep this at a 4/6 because our opponent doesn't really have the means to either like removing a 6 defense follower for 4 play points unless they use all of their play points. That's something that can happen. But they used all their play points to get rid of 1 card, which is pretty fine because that kind of like stuns them for a turn to give us into turn 5, feeling nice. And especially with all the cards that are going to be healing us, this isn't really a bad card to be running. But alright, let's go ahead and transition into the deck list here. So let's look at the version that's on the recommended deck list for Shadowverse Evolve. Alright, so let us transition into the Shadowverse Evolve version for Festive Forestcraft. Now, this is definitely a different take, I would say. It definitely has some good elements for late game with Cynthia in it. But I will say, you could definitely cheat out Cynthia. That's probably the cool part, while you being able to probably spend more play points for fairies. But I don't know, I kind of disagree just because we want a bit of a longer late game or something that's a little bit better. But I think Cynthia is still a pretty nice play for late game, but I really don't want to include fairies into the deck just because if we're going to be playing puppets, then there's better ways to make 0-cost cards in our puppet deck. Alrighty, and then we're getting in my version of the build, which I feel like kind of just synergizes a little bit better. The only thing you do have to really pay attention to is the amount of puppets you're putting into your EX area, along with the cards you're putting in with festive cards, so make sure you do pay attention to that. Alright, but we really didn't get into the evolve cards, so I did want to talk about the evolve cards for these festive cards. Alright, so we never talked about what the Elven Waitress did. So on evolve, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may put a festive card from one of them into your EX area and put the rest of the bottom of your deck in any order. Of course, this being a wonderful one-of card that we are going to have in our Evolved deck, this is going to be wonderful by being able to dig through your deck, finding more festive cards, being able to find the Hazumi as fast as possible, and keeping it in the EX area from when we do go for the big shotgun play is going to be very vital. And then we never talked about the Kakakuri Servant, which is going to help us on Evolve as long as there are 3 cards in the EX area, we're able to deal 3 damage or something. But especially in the early game, spending a total of 3 play points, being able to deal 2 damage to a follower, and then swinging in for another one is just good for tempo. And of course, transitioning back, of course, we're going to have our late game Oh Great World, especially for the 10 play points. Being able to do 4 to the face and then 4 to the board constantly once we get to the late game is going to be pretty good. We have that Zwei for that extra removal, just in case we need to get those Victoria tokens out and then, you know, stop him from taking damage. And then we have the big Noah from when we go for the big play and then having all those puppets in our EX area. But yeah, soldiers, this is the deck. I will be having it public as soon as I'm done recording this video. So any of you soldiers that are checking it out before you check out the video, then I highly suggest you check vice versa, either looking at the video after you watch the video or looking at the deck and then watching the video so you can get a good explanation of the deck. And unfortunately, I'm not doing a grade this time around since I'm not considering this an episode of Inverse Academy, just kind of doing a breakdown of the deck, which technically that's what Inverse Academy was, but it wasn't really formatted the same way like I usually do. So if you soldiers really want me to get back to grading it, let me know in the comments below and I'll get back to it. But I do want to give a huge shout out to Shadow Showdown here, just because, like, personally I've been beating myself up with Bushy Navi. They haven't been organizing the cards like how I like it versus how I see it here. Like, it organizes the cards, and that was kind of like my biggest thing. All the 5 costs are together, or the 4 costs with the 1 cost. Everything's just together and it looks nice. And then you have access to all these other tools and whatnot. So huge shout out to anyone who's working over there for Shadow Showdown. But yeah, soldiers, that is pretty much it for the video. I did want to talk about the whole TCG player thing going on. So that was absolutely crazy. I'm sorry that I didn't kind of like drop a video and kind of rally everybody together when it was happening. When I wanted to make the video, they started releasing the cards and I was like, okay, well, it's kind of too late to talk about it. But that still happening over the weekend was still insane because I kind of wanted to gauge the prices and see where everything was at. We were talking about it at locals. It was just a little insane, but not being able to buy your cards over the weekend did kind of like, I wouldn't say hurt the market, but I definitely was looking forward to spending some money this weekend, and then I had no gauge on how much these cards were going to cost, so I was like, all right, you know what, I'm just going to wait, and everything's kind of solidified now. So if you want to go ahead and pick up your cards, you're able to now. If you haven't checked since last time, the Shadowverse Evolved cards are definitely live. But anyways, that was crazy. But, you know, soldiers, make sure you are safe in whatever you do tonight and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah. TRINN. Just to get you away. What I got to do. What I got to do.